to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 2. Let's talk about the fight. Even now, I'm almost at a loss for words. How to best encapsulate the many emotions I felt as I watched Tyson Fury brutalize Deontay Wilder, bully the bully, for 7 rounds. It's quite the task, and it's more than I can fit into just one video, because this fight and its outcome has serious repercussions moving forward for the heavyweight division. So first things first, let's break down the fight. Ladies and gentlemen, if Tyson Fury did anything to Deontay Wilder, it was reiterate what we already knew, that Wilder's no boxer. You know, he's no boxer's boxer. This is not a skill guy. This is not a technician or a tactician.
Nope.
This is a guy who largely in part has been relying on one trick to get him through. And even I thought that one trick might work tonight. I must admit that I'm eating crow because I picked Deontay Wilder to win the fight. I wasn't sure if Tyson Fury could get the job done, being the aggressor, getting on the front foot, and opening up more than he normally does. I felt that might give Wilder the opportunity to plant a big right hand in there, because that's not how Tyson Fury fought the first fight. And boy, was I wrong. But even though I was wrong,
Couldn't be more happy.
I'm glad I was wrong, because now the WBC title is safely in the hands of a real fighter and a real champion. His name is Tyson Fury. In the fight, we saw a severe inability from Deontay Wilder to weather the punches from a heavier Tyson Fury than the one he faced the first time out. Every shot that got through
On Deontay Wilder.
moved his entire body. It became crystal clear early in this fight that
Wilder can't hold him.
Tyson Fury's size, coupled with the aggression that he was exhibiting, was too much for Deontay to contain. Ahead of this fight, there were those out there that felt Wilder don't take the best punch. And these suspicions were fueled by the left hook he received from Eric Molina, the looping right hand that he received from Dominic Breazeale right before Dominic Breazeale was subsequently knocked out. There were those out there that felt that Deontay Wilder really doesn't take the best punch, and if it hasn't costed him yet, it's because he doesn't usually fight very big punchers. I mean, if hindsight is 20/20, just look back and ask yourself, what pressure fighters has Deontay Wilder ever fought? What aggressive maulers, brawlers, those kinds of individuals, what kind of guys like that has Deontay Wilder fought? The kind of guys that aren't going to shy away from trading blows, the kind of guys that are going to be all over him and stay with him, you know?
Like Fury did.
These aforementioned factors fueled the suspicion that Deontay Wilder doesn't really take the best punch, and if he's managed to go undefeated for this long, it has been by avoiding fights with those kinds of interesting fighters, those kinds of interesting punchers. And, you know, I myself wasn't convinced that Fury in one camp could become one of those kinds of guys, because Fury's bread and butter really is his boxing, you know, his feinting, his switch hitting, his mobility, his agility, and his elusiveness, but not really his power or his volume. So I wasn't sure if Tyson Fury could be that guy, but that's very much what he became for this fight, and it worked. From the opening bell, the very first round, almost immediately, you saw that Tyson Fury's talk ahead of the fight of going for the gusto, going for the knockout. It wasn't just build-up for the sake of build-up. He meant business. He had Deontay Wilder giving up a lot of ground, a lot of real estate from the opening bell, in the opening round. Deontay Wilder was forced into a situation to where he's got to try to be the same puncher that he normally is whilst moving backwards. And for Wilder, this was a tough ask. This was a difficult task, because Deontay Wilder is no boxer's boxer. He's no technician. He's no tactician. That's not what he's known for. That's not what he's good at. This is the guy who stated of his own admission that he doesn't need skill because he has power.
Right.
I think he could have done with some skill in yesterday's fight. But this is what he was lacking, and this has always been the case. That, yeah, Wilder's a good puncher. He can punch, but he's a shit boxer.
Shit.
And he's been relying on his punch for far too long. As a result of that, the chickens have come home to roost. As a result of this fight, I imagine that there are going to be parallels drawn between Deontay Wilder's devastating loss at the hands of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua's devastating loss at the hands of Andy Ruiz. I imagine that there are going to be parallels, comparisons, and retrospects ahead of what could be a potential rubber match. But there are differences to be addressed. You see, when Anthony Joshua lost to Andy Ruiz, and it was a crushing loss on the scale of Wilder's loss to Tyson Fury, those were both systematic beatings, there were. But the difference between them is, ahead of what could be, or what could have been, a second fight between Anthony and Andy, you knew what adjustments Joshua could make in the rematch, to win the rematch. You knew that if you lost the first fight, it's because you had a defensive lapse in judgment. You gave up your height to the smaller guy and decided to trade hooks on the inside, where he's lethal. So in a rematch, you do the opposite. You use your height, you use your jab, you use your legs to keep this little guy on the outside where he can't land those hooks. Essentially, you knew that there was a chance that Anthony Joshua was not just a big puncher, but a good skilled boxer. You knew that he has an avenue of opportunity to win the rematch. Whereas with Wilder, you can't say the same thing because Wilder's not the kind of fighter that makes adjustments. He's not a tactician or a technician.
He never was.
In many ways, what we saw was a modern reiteration of what Joe Calzaghe did to Jeff Lacey. A systematic beating, a systematic breakdown that could leave a fighter like Deontay Wilder, a puncher like Deontay Wilder, forever changed and never quite the same. In this situation, not for the better, but for the worse. Because Wilder's 34 years old. You're about, 43, 44 fights into your pro career. You just took your first loss.
Can you come back from that?
If you were more of a pure boxer, or even a boxer puncher, that kind of fighter, there would be room to say that maybe Wilder can win the rematch because he can make certain alterations to his implementation. Make certain adjustments.
Little subtleties.
That's if Wilder was that kind of fighter. But we all know that Wilder's not that kind of fighter. So hypothetically speaking, if Deontay Wilder were to invoke his rematch clause, a rematch clause that would see him only getting 40% of the pot as opposed to the 50% he got in the first two fights. If he invokes this rematch clause and decides to go ahead with a third fight, what does he change and how does he change it when he was never a technical fighter to begin with? What exactly can he do differently in a rubber match that he didn't do or hasn't been doing the entirety of his career? Deontay Wilder was quite content just being a puncher. He was never a volume guy. He was never a particularly busy fighter or prolific puncher. He was always a guy waiting for the opportunity to land that one shot. And at 34 years old, coming off a systematic beating like this one, you do have to question what exactly can he do differently in a rubber match. And if there's nothing he can do differently, if this is more than he can bounce back from in this amount of time, is there even a need for a third fight?
I don't think so.
That adjustments need to be made is without question. So the real question is, can Deontay Wilder even make them? These adjustments aren't limited to letting your hands go and throwing more. There's also his footwork to be addressed, his position relative to that of his opponents, and whether or not he can maintain it to land the kind of punches that he wants to land. Deontay Wilder's used to standing there, floating his left hand, trying to line a guy up to land that right. That's what he's accustomed to doing with these smaller, stationary targets that are there to be hit. Those kinds of guys. Because the vast majority of fighters in Deontay Wilder's resume, the vast majority of these knockouts that he's racked up over the years are against just those kinds of fighters. Not 6'9" guys weighing in at 273, mauling you, forcing you to give up ground, to give up real estate. You're going to have to fight, learn to fight on the go, and you've never had to do that before. So at 34 years old, having fought about 43, 44 times, there's a question as to whether or not Wilder can do this. And if he cannot, then there's no need for a third fight. You're just going to see what you already saw in the second fight. I want to say that this entire saga between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury is very much a case of a cherry pick gone wrong. That in that first fight, when Deontay Wilder so decided to give this guy a shot at his green belt, he didn't give him that shot for the right reasons. He didn't give him that opportunity because he felt that Tyson Fury earned it or that Tyson Fury was at his best. Quite the opposite. Tyson Fury was a man on the comeback trail, a guy on the rebound, and it is for this reason that Wilder decided to fight him. And it all blew up in his face because in the first fight, you had a lot of people saying after it was over that Tyson Fury was robbed, that he deserved a decision. He didn't get that decision. What does he do? He comes back, he stops this guy. And punchers don't bounce back from these kinds of losses the same way some other fighters do. When it comes to a puncher like Deontay Wilder, there used to be in a guy for a very long time, so much so that if the day ever comes that all of that comes to a screeching halt, they don't know what to do thereafter. That air of invincibility is gone. In that way, the sins of yesterday are rearing their ugly heads here today and demanding payment. Payment of Deontay Wilder that has so costed him his WBC title, his undefeated record, and whatever reputation he had as the most frightening puncher in the entire weight class and the most frightening puncher in the history of boxing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I never believed that shit to begin with. I never bought into this air that Deontay Wilder is a puncher on the scale of a George Foreman, a Sonny Liston, a Mike Tyson, and what other legendary punchers the annals of boxing history are riddled with. I never felt that way about this guy.
Not once.
Because to me, he seemed very much an opportunist.
A con man.
Oh, you can punch, yeah, and you're a big puncher for this era of heavyweights. In this era, yeah, you hit hard, you do. But we know why you picked Tyson Fury. You picked Tyson Fury because Tyson Fury's not known as a puncher, because he's not known as a concussive hitter.
That's why.
You thought you chose the path of least resistance. Been telling you guys for a long time that it's not a coincidence that Deontay Wilder has been around for as long as he has and not faced very many, if any, big punchers. That this is not by mistake, but by design. He's been guided away from certain fights with certain fighters to accent his finer qualities through creative matchmaking. Putting him in there with guys that are all from the same cookie cutter. You know, those kinds of opponents.
No hopers.
And that kind of matchmaking does not spurt growth in a fighter so much as a false sense of security. And it is that false sense of security that led Deontay Wilder into the ring with Tyson Fury. Wilder thought that his power would still be there to avail him, and in the first fight we saw, Wilder took his best shot. You took your best shot, and you landed it, not once, but twice, and even that was not enough.
You didn't beat him.
In this fight, you got manhandled. You got bullied, brutalized, battered.
Embarrassed.
And all by a guy who you were calling a pillow puncher, a feather duster. So what does that do to a fighter psychologically, who already has a very limited skill set? He had one trick, and he just tried to use that trick, and it didn't work. It didn't work for the second time. You know, Wilder he managed to land the right hand 2 times in the first fight, but it wasn't enough. In the second fight, that right hand was neutralized, almost non-existent. I don't recall seeing Wilder land a punch.
I really don't.
What do you think that does to a guy psychologically? I want to say that what Tyson Fury did was monumental. Perhaps even more monumental than when he beat Vladimir Klitschko. I don't think that he really ever got the full credit for having did what he did against Vladimir, which was effectively opening up the heavyweight division and ending the long reign of the most dominant force it had ever seen in a long time, you know? Fury is responsible for that, you realize. Fury helped to mold today's heavyweight division by being the one to defeat Vladimir Klitschko. As a result of that, new opportunities for new fighters to become world champions ensued. Tyson Fury was responsible for that. He comes back. He rescues the WBC title from the clutches of a would-be champion who had no intention of defending it against all comers or unifying it with the only other champion at the weight. And Tyson Fury alone is responsible for all of this. I mean, I don't think people realize, I don't think it has sunk in for the boxing fans, the boxing community at large, just how monumental all of this is. These are career-defining fights, career-defining victories. It's not just that Tyson Fury participate in some of the most important fights the division has seen in the last 10 years. It's not just that. It's that he emerged the victor both times. And I see no need for Tyson Fury to waste any more time on Deontay Wilder in spite of the contractual obligations, because I don't think Wilder has anything else to offer in a third fight.
I don't.
Here today, Tyson Fury stands on the precipice of greatness. A precipice that Deontay Wilder sat on for some time and willfully walked away from several times. Tyson Fury could go on to become the heavyweight division's next undisputed champion. That fight is at his feet. It's at the door. And I see no reason for such a fight to be delayed
To give Deontay another chance.
by Deontay Wilder. So that Wilder can do what? Get dominated again? Let's be honest with each other. Wilder lost the first fight, and the judges gave him a gift draw, to keep him in the running, to keep him in the conversation. But myself and many others feel that Wilder lost that first fight. Tyson Fury comes back, he puts a stamp on it in the second fight. So for what reason do we need to see a third when Tyson Fury stands on the precipice of becoming the next undisputed champion? This is a fight of epic proportions on an epic scale that hasn't been seen in a very long time, because Tyson Fury's fans just so happen to be on the same side of the world as Anthony Joshua's fans. This could very well be one of the biggest fights the United Kingdom has ever seen, and perhaps the world has ever seen. This fight could very well shatter records. That's what this fight could mean for the division. That's what this fight could mean for boxing. That's what this fight could mean for the UK. So why should this kind of a fight be delayed any further to indulge Deontay Wilder for a third time? What's he gonna do in a third fight? I don't pity Deontay Wilder. I don't sympathize with his plight. I don't. Because
He did it to himself.
for a guy who's been around since 2008, you've had ample opportunity to expand and add to your repertoire. But you were quite content just being a puncher for 10 or 11 years. At some point, it's going to catch up to you.
If you don't grow.
No matter what kind of promotion or production goes into marketing Deontay as something that he wasn't, something that he's not. No matter how much effort, how much smoke, and how many mirrors they use to try to give you this image of Deontay Wilder, the facts are what they are. This guy was little more than a one-handed, limited fighter. And it was only a matter of time before it caught up to him. Oh, granted that some of us saw this happening sooner than others, but many of us agreed that Wilder's on borrowed time. Sooner or later, it's going to catch up. Because you can only disguise your weaknesses but for so long. And his weaknesses were very much evident in the choices that he made, the fights that he didn't have, and what fights he did have. He only chose to fight Fury because Fury wasn't known as a puncher, and he was a guy on the comeback trail, on the rebound. And all of that has blown up in his face. In that way, I don't pity him. I don't feel sorry for him. And I don't see how he can become a champion again. That Joshua fight and all that money, that's off the table for him, at least right now. It's not about Wilder versus Joshua anymore. It's about Joshua versus Fury. That's the fight that needs to happen.